Okay, it's 2 o'clock. I think a couple people are joining, but might as well just jump on into it. Does that sound good with you guys? Let's go. Hi and welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today to go over AGU press events at AGU Fall Meeting 2021. If you're here, you're either a panelist or a PIO organizing a press event. So welcome. We're excited to work with you all. A little bit about our team. This is the media relations team at AGU. I'm Hope Garland. I'm a media relations specialist here.
I'm Becca Zombek. I'm another media relations specialist.
Our colleagues, Nancy and Liza, are also here as well. Many of you have probably worked with them in the past. They're going to be hopping in and out for questions and answers. So feel free to drop them a question in the chat if something comes up, but excited to have them today. Today, we're going to be touching on every aspect of participating in a press event at AGU21, from format types to preparing your slides to tricks and tips for the day of. We've blocked out time for questions between each of these sections. We're going to be running this kind of similarly to how we're running press conferences and press briefings questions. So if you do have a question that comes up, you can either type it out in the Q&A box, so in that question box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and one of us will read it out loud, or you can drop a note that you'd like your audio to be opened up so that you can ask that question directly. So if something comes up, feel free to drop us a line. Without further ado, AGU21 press operations and logistics. This year, all press events will be held virtually over Zoom webinar and Zoom meetings, but there will be an on-site quiet room for panelists that are attending in person. More to come on that through this presentation. We're expecting about 200 members of the media. This is everything from journalism students to press officers. At this point, outlets represented include national business, like the Washington Post, all the way to science-focused publications like Scientific American. Quick reminder for everyone here that these press events are intended for journalists, so not a good format to invite colleagues, families, or friends. Members of the media are going to be our main audience, our only audience. We are hosting 3 different types of events this year. I like to think of the first 2 press conferences and briefings together because they have almost identical formats, or they have identical formats. Both of these would start out with a formal presentation, slides, deck, presenting findings, followed by a Q&A period. The conferences announce new research findings intended for a wide audience, whereas briefings provide more of an update on an ongoing mission or research project. Roundtables will run a little bit differently. So they'll be using Zoom meetings instead of webinars, for example. That's one difference. But we also envision these a little bit different as more of an informal discussion between researchers and journalists. You might think of this as kind of like a group interview, or even a really good office hour session where people come in with really informed questions. Then you can have a true discussion dialogue about a certain topic and get into the weeds based on what the reporters might be interested in talking about. But the difference is there could be some slides at the top, but it's a quick introduction, and the main focus for roundtables is on that Q&A period. To dig into press conferences a little bit, you'll have 25 minutes in total during a press conference or briefings to go over slides. You'll want to work out with your co-presenters who is going to take most of that time, or how you want to split it up amongst yourselves, but 25 minutes is your goal for the total presentation. And then the rest of the time, we've allotted 1 hour, will be for a Q&A period. Our team, someone from our team, so Hope, so myself, Becca, or Liza will be on to introduce the panel, introduce the topic, and advance the slides. We'll also be moderating the Q&A by looking through the questions in that Q&A box and making sure that they're directed to the appropriate researcher at the end. If you are a panelist for a conference or a briefing, we do require that you record a backup of your presentation by December 6th, which is coming up really fast. There's a little bit more information about that in the informational PDFs that we sent over last week. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have about that a little further on. As far as logistics goes for press conferences and briefings, we're going to be conducting these over Zoom webinar, which is the platform that we're on now. So if you are conducting a conference or a briefing, feel free to take a look around the format now, look at all the different functions. We'll add the speakers and the PIOs as panelists. So right now, Becca, Liza, Nancy, and myself are panelists on the platform. So we have access to video, we can share our screen, we can use audio, and then all of the journalists will be attendees. So they have no access to video or sharing their screens. And we can, as the host, choose to open up their audio line if they do have a question. But for the most part, there'll be no video, no audio. We will send you a direct link to join the webinar. It's really important that you don't share this link with anyone, because anyone who uses this link will automatically get panelist status. If you do run into issues, no need to worry. We are able to manually change you from an attendee to a panelist if it comes to it. So don't worry if you lose the link, but best to keep that on you. Oh. You might be wondering, I think a lot of you have been wondering, if you're on site, what the logistics will look like for you. On-site participants will have a quiet room that we're hosting, so you can gather with your other panelists. We'll be separating you apart a little bit, but you will have time to get together. If you are choosing to participate and present from our on-site room, you'll need to bring a laptop, wired headphones, and an adapter to plug into an Ethernet cable. Now for the headphones, wired headphones, we ask that they have a microphone on them. And it doesn't need to be a fancy microphone. Something like these headphones, where there's kind of like the small microphone that picks up audio, works really well and is fine. We did do a test run with some AirPods, which, you can answer the phone with AirPods, no problem. But when we did the test run with AirPods, there was some issues. So we asked that you do not use AirPods here, but just a simple wired headphone with a microphone is great. We will, following our events, if you are an on-site participant, we'll be encouraging on-site reporters to meet up with you after the event. So just stick around in the quiet room for a few minutes, and we'll be ushering people in if there are any. A couple of extra tips. You'll want to use the side-by-side view in Zoom webinar when you're presenting. This is going to allow you to keep a view of yourself and the other panelists without covering the slides. So that's a helpful tip. And if for any reason the event cannot take place over Zoom, maybe the platform is having some issues or we're unable to connect for whatever reason, we have organized a backup teleconference line. A little bit more information about that is also in the informational packet, and hopefully we won't have to use it. But we do have that as an option. I've already kind of mentioned this, but just to go through that Q&A process again, if for press conferences and briefings, we'll ask reporters to drop their questions in the Q&A box. At the end, one of us will either read that aloud, or we'll open up the mic for a reporter to ask the question directly. And that might make more sense if the reporter, say, has a complicated question, or maybe has a multiple part question. One tip and one little logistics right here that we wanted to note is that we're asking all press conference panelists to wait to speak to reporters until after the event. Your presentation is embargoed until the press conference, so please let your institutional press officers know to hold any press releases or blog posts until after the event. If a reporter does approach you about this research, just let us know. We're happy to work with them and let them know when the embargo will lift, make sure they have the right dates and all the information. Okay, moving on to roundtables here. Big difference between roundtables and press conferences is going to be the length of the presentation, which we want to limit to under 10 minutes for media roundtables. And so that's the length of the slides or the introductions at the top. Our team, so someone from AGU, will start the roundtable by briefly welcoming everyone before passing the mic over to the organizing PIO. That PIO will take it from there with maybe a quick introduction of the topic and the panelists, including advancing any slides in that short 10-minute introduction. And then PIOs will be responsible for moderating the discussion, but we encourage you to take an informal approach to the moderation. For example, if it's a smaller group of reporters at this roundtable, you might just take a step back and allow the discussion to flow. You might also at the same time keep an eye on the comment section in case a question does pop up from someone who does not want to be on audio but prefers to use the chat box in Zoom meetings. We've allotted one time for roundtables, but they could also end whenever there are no more questions. Okay, zooming through this. Logistics for roundtables. As I mentioned, this is going to be over Zoom meetings, which is the more common Zoom platform. On-site participants can also participate over from the quiet room that will be on site, so you're welcome to join us there. The big difference between roundtables and media conferences is that attendees, there's no distinction between attendees and panelists for these roundtables. So they will have audio, they will be able to use their video, they will be able to share their screens, but we're not going to have probably reporters sharing their screens unless they have a very interesting question. So be prepared in this format for reporters to ask you questions directly and for just the conversation to take its natural course. We will be sending you a direct link to the Zoom meeting this week. And just a reminder here, the audience for the event is journalists. So please do not share this invite with colleagues, family, or friends. Okay, so that brings us to some questions to start about these logistics.
We have one in the chat about press conferences and recording. So for recording your presentations in advance, there's actually a full slide deck, PowerPoint in that press materials folder with full instructions for things like format, file format, audio, the layout that we would like. So taking a look at that, I think, will be helpful. And then okay, Nancy would like to jump in, I guess. Okay. Nancy, take it away.
Oh, sorry. No, I think you were answering it fine. I was just saying that we were answering that question live rather than typing in the chat.
Oh, okay, I thought you wanted to jump in. But yeah, so each presentation will be individually recorded. It does not need to be a single 25-minute presentation. Only the slides will need to be ultimately continuous, and your PIO will compile that.
Okay, seen a question from Liz. Hi. For press roundtables, does the presentation need to be pre-recorded? So for those roundtables, no. Presentation does not need to be pre-recorded. We do ask that you upload any slides by the 6th of December, but because there's kind of an organic conversation and discussion around roundtables, no pre-record is necessary. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions on logistics for any of the press events so far? Yes, Julie, hi, nice to meet you, sort of. Press recording or recordings of the press events will all be available on YouTube, so they will be publicly available, I believe. And for panels, PIOs, I believe, will be in charge of consolidating all of those slides into one long PowerPoint.
Okay, great.
So if you do think of another logistics question, do just pop it in the chat. Who is that for wildfire?
Got it.
Oh.
Hey, Paul, I think you're Liza is involved in organizing the wildfire panel, if that's right. We can talk to you offline about the logistics specifically for the wildfire panel. Any specific questions, we're happy to help you with at another time.
Yeah.
Mara, hey Mara, for press conferences, do slides need to be included in the recording or separately? I think I'm gonna have to put this to the team though, but I'm pretty sure we would like the slides to be included in the reporting. Through the Zoom platform does allow you to do recordings over Zoom. So that's kind of the format that we'd like to see them in. And there's some more information about that in those packets, if I'm not wrong.
And just to jump in, that the purpose of the recording, just so it kind of makes sense, is that if for some reason someone's at home and their internet goes out, or any of those logistical things happen, we have the recording so that we can play the recording. That's really what the backup's for. So think of it as if you were unable to attend for some reason, we still can have your presentation there. So yes, it's exactly how you'd want to present it with your video and your slides. And I think there's some more questions.
Sweet. Okay, Julia asks, do reporters register for the event or do they just show up? Wondering if we'll have an idea in advance of attendance size. So we've made it this year so reporters do not have to register for the event, just to kind of take away a hurdle or a barrier that's made things more difficult in the past. So we will not have that number for you in advance. Okay. Hey, Stephanie, for roundtables, how/where do we upload the slides? Sorry if this was already mentioned. No worries. You need to upload the slides. We've created a Dropbox for every single event and reached out to the organizing PIO with a link so that they can access that Dropbox. What we kind of envision this is as the organizing PIO would assemble all of the slides together and just upload that. If you missed the link or you're having any issues with that, feel free to shoot us an email, Becca or myself, and we can work with you to give you access.
And I have a question from Noor. How will after press conference interviews be handled? So for folks who are on site, I believe the current plan is that we will invite journalists to come to meet panelists who are on site in the quiet room. And they can chat there for, I think, about 30 minutes until we sort of have to get the room set up for the next event. And then for journalists who are off site, it's really that would be more of a traditional one-on-one interaction where they would just get in contact with you and set something up, via Zoom.
Okay, Julia asks, will we be able to get a list of attendees after the event? I think through the Zoom, you'll be able to see their names. We haven't thought about giving in a list of attendees, so we'll have to follow up with you on that, but you will be able to see a list of all the people who are attending. Okay, Catherine asks, will today's presentation be available to watch later? Some of our panelists couldn't attend today. Absolutely. We're actually currently recording this webinar right now, so we'll have that for you. I think we started recording it a little early, so they'll have to skip through 5 minutes of blank, but we'll have that.
I think there's a couple other questions here.
Yeah.
Will the recording on YouTube be the live presentation or the pre-recorded presentation? That will be the live presentation. So we're going to record it just like we are here. And that will be posted on YouTube probably within a couple hours after the event happens. We try to get it up as quickly as possible.
Okay, Joy asked, will press conference recordings only be available on the day of the press conference? They won't be available ahead of time, correct? Yes. We'll have those available within a couple hours, as Nancy mentioned.
And for Pontus, we have, how will remote reporters know my contact info in case they want to have follow-up conversations? So for information on all of these press events, we'll have everybody's contact information, so your institution and your email. So reporters will have access to that and they can just follow up with you.
And feel free to include that too in your presentation. Type it in. Yeah, we can put it in the chat as well during the press conference. And if anyone reaches out to us and you're happy with us sharing it, that's fine too.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're next section is going to discuss how to prepare your presentation for this press event. So Becca, take it away.
Sure thing. Just had to close all the chat windows. Yeah, so we're just going to run through a couple of high-level tips for preparing a presentation for a press event. Hope you can go to the next slide. Sort of the top level of this is please don't plan on just sort of tweaking your scientific presentation that you might be giving at the main part of the conference. The purpose of a press event, for those of you who have not done one before, is very different from giving a traditional science talk to a scientific audience. The goal of a press event is to get people who don't really know anything about your research to understand what you're doing and get excited about it in about 5 minutes, which is sort of a tall order. But we're going to try and help you through this. And of course, we encourage you to work with your PIO and your other panelists to really hone that presentation and get it as punchy and impactful as you can. As Hope mentioned, we are looking for a total of 25 minutes for all speakers on your panel. So depending on how long or how many people you have, you'll have a different amount of time to speak. But we do recommend that you slot, in terms of pacing, about 1 slide per minute of speaking time. And this just helps you not be rushed, but also keep things moving at a pretty good pace. And as I said before, you know, the main goal is to get your audience, who are reporters, to understand your work and get excited about it. And so to do that, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to understand what you're saying. And there are a couple of high-level, again, tips that we have for facilitating that. Hope, if you want to. In terms of how to structure a press event presentation generally, you want to start with the news. Like, don't bury what's exciting all the way at the end. Lead with what's exciting, what's impactful to people, and why it matters to people. You want to start with your hook of like, why should people care about this? What's exciting and new? And then once you've said that, you need to provide a little bit of background, provide the context that will let them really understand the importance of this new work. So what does your new work change about what was understood in the field? Compare it to what was already known. Do you have exciting new statistics? Did a big event happen? Those sorts of things. And I know that your methods and how you got to those results are very important, but we do encourage people to really only stick to the highest level methods. You know, if you were describing to, you know, a stranger in the street in 15 seconds what you were doing, like that's the level of methods that we're looking for, just enough that they understand what you're working on. And then once you've gone through what's new, what's exciting, why is it new, like where does it fit into the puzzle, how you did it, you want to circle back to the take-home message. And when you're thinking about what your take-home message is, think about a reporter flipping through notes at the end of a long day. What are the 2 or 3, or even 1, like a single point that you really want to be sticky? Like they're flipping through and they go, oh yeah, I remember that talk. That was about X. What is that X? Like, what do you want them to remember? End on that and start with that as well. Really just bookend, like what's exciting. So that's how we recommend generally structuring these talks. And when you're doing the actual presentation, as well as crafting the slides, again, remembering that your goal here is, like, you don't want your reporters to have to work to understand what you're saying. So you want to use plain language, avoiding complex terms that people would have to not only Google, but like do some serious digging on Wikipedia to figure out what you mean. So keep everything plain language, avoid using shorthand or acronyms that, again, they might have to look up, avoiding abbreviations. Just some good science communication techniques. Additionally, when you're thinking about designing your slides, we want to keep things pretty as light on text as possible, because if you have a lot of text, people will just be reading what's on the screen while sort of half listening to what you're saying maybe. So keeping a nice mix of text and then engaging illustrations or graphics or images can really help just make your slides engaging and easier to understand. And then just a note about accessibility as well. We do encourage you to try to use a colorblind friendly color scheme for plots or graphics that you might be presenting. I put an example on the right here, but if you just look up colorblind friendly color schemes, there are lots of options. There are even packages and for like R and MATLAB where you can just pull them right in, and it's very easy. And just another formatting note, we do ask you to use the widescreen, the 16:9 slide layout. Okay, and so we're going to blow through a couple of examples of what to include and what to not use on your slides. So for images, we like these. It's people doing things. It's engaging. It's interesting. We want to know more about it. So that's a yes. This is an example of a graphic that we like. It's pretty simple. It would be good for providing context for your results. There's the space station up there, and it's labeled with enough stuff that is useful, but not overly technical. And so this would be a green light from us to use. Fun illustrations. If you don't have a picture of, for example, the surface of Mars that you need, go ahead and use a fun illustration. That's always nice. If you're using graphs, which some of you, I'm sure you will be, do keep them simple and relatively easy to understand. So for example, here we have a single line plot that you can walk through again relatively quickly. When you're thinking about what plots to include, think about that 1 minute per slide. You don't want to spend 7 minutes talking through a single complicated graph. You want it to be punchy and easy to remember and easy to understand. So this is nice. This is a good graph. This is not a good graph. It is complicated. There are lots of small pieces. You know, log is on there. People might not know what that is. So we would, if you find yourself using something like this, take a step back, consider what other types of data visualization techniques you could use to convey what's really important. Again, what that sticky take-home message is. If you would like to include a table, please do not. For the most part, they tend to have lots of jargon and numbers that people would need a lot of sort of technical understanding or context to really grasp the meaning of, units that people might not be familiar with, and ultimately just a lot of text that people won't be able to get a lot of meaning out of. So do avoid a table if you can. In terms of overall slide layout, try to keep it simple, a couple of key bullet points, not too much text, maybe animating in points as you go to avoid overwhelming people with a lot of bullet points at once, and with a simple background. So on the left, we have a nice example with a very engaging graphic on the right, and then the slide on the right, we have a very busy background, different colors of text, lots of numbers, lots of units, less easy to understand. So go for the left more than the right. And then finally, we know you have a lot of really fun field images or cool experiments in the lab, but please do try and pick just the couple like punchiest, most exciting images and sprinkle them throughout your talk. If you do a collage, people won't know where to look. They'll just be like, okay, it's a lot of glaciers. Like, which one is the most exciting? I don't know. Avoid the urge to collage. Sorry. And when you are thinking about what images to use, you have to use things that either you own or your co-authors have explicitly, for example, like given you written permission to use and for it to be sort of circulated, or otherwise images that are in the public domain or have a Creative Commons license. And these are relatively easy to find nowadays, especially from government agencies like NASA and NOAA. You can go onto their websites and find some really nice images there. Wikimedia and Creative Commons and Unsplash are all great resources. As is Flickr, actually. A lot of these government agencies have photos on Flickr as well, which I think is the next slide. Yeah. And on Google, if you're just looking on Google, if you go under usage rights, you can actually just select the Creative Commons license and you'll be good to go.
Great, thanks, Becca. Moving right along into what to expect on the day of the event. So imagine you've used all of these helpful tips Becca has kind of presented. You've got your presentation, you've spoken with your panelists, and it is the morning of your press event. What happens next? So, oh, these got flipped. We'll just move on through and then ask questions about both together. Okay, so what happens next? So you will start by entering the Zoom webinar or Zoom meeting link through the link that we've sent to you, that are going to send to you this week. We ask that everyone enters the virtual meeting 20 minutes before the event. If you are on site and would like to go to the press quiet room, we ask that you report to the press quiet room 30 minutes before the event starts, so that we can make sure you're situated, got your Wi-Fi, and are good to go. We'll be on hand to keep you on track and walk you through the event. So stay calm if any questions pop up, or if you run into any technical issues, we're right here at all times. If you do run into some technical issue, here's some quick troubleshooting items. The first thing you're going to want to let us know is let us know via the chat box. So as we've been, if you're on the Zoom webinar platform, so you're for press conference or briefing, you'll notice that there's a Q&A box, there's a Q&A option, and then there's a chat option. So if you are a presenter for a press conference or briefing and you're running into technical issues, you'll want to hit that chat function, make sure that it's going to only hosts and panelists versus all attendees, and then just drop us a note saying, hey, I'm having some issues with my personal Wi-Fi, or just explain whatever situation you're in. Your first line of defense, if you are having issues with connectivity, is going to be to turn off your video background. So I might take off this great AGU setting and just show you whatever the blank wall that's behind me. Or you might turn off your video. Obviously, video is the best, but audio only will work in a pinch. So don't feel that will, for most cases, that does help with connectivity issues. If the problem persists, you can dial in via phone through Zoom. That information will have been in the invitation. So keep the email on hand so you can have it in a tricky situation. But hopefully we'll get it all working, and we won't have to have any issues this year. We can avoid some common audio issues outside of those connectivity things you can't predict by using our best practices. So first, one thing that you're going to want to do after this webinar sometime this week is to make sure you've downloaded the latest version of Zoom. That'll help things off the bat. And then also we recommend downloading the latest version of whatever web browser that you prefer. And that's just in case, say, your Zoom app isn't working at the time, you can always join even a Zoom video call through your browser. So making sure you have the latest version of both of those is a good place to start. As far as audio, no matter where you're presenting, so if you're on site or you're presenting virtually from your home or your offices somewhere else, we ask that you use headphones and a microphone to avoid background noise, even if you're just by yourself. So avoiding rooms that echo will also help with the background noise. So if you have a room in your house that has nice carpet or drapes or something like that, that'd probably be a good place to present from. But rooms like a kitchen can have a little bit of echo noise. So avoid that. And the golden rule, please mute your mic when you're not speaking. As far as visual goes, be sure that there's good lighting in the room. If you have a desk lamp or a table lamp, it's best to have that right behind your computer facing you so that your face is well lit. But as long as people can see you, you're great. And be careful about objects in your background. So take a little inventory. If you have your office setting behind you, take a little inventory of what objects are in your background and if you want them to be in display, because we wanted to remind you that if you are presenting here, you will be visible at all times throughout the call. Okay. As far as attire, we ask that you stick to business casual. Jackets and ties are totally optional. Just remember to stick with solid colors without prints and simple accessories. You're also welcome to wear a zip up or a shirt or something with your organization logo, as this interviewee did at a previous fall meeting. Okay, so shifting a little bit, just wanted to take a moment to walk through a question that we've heard a lot, which is what is on the record? On the record is a phrase that journalists use to mean anything you say can be both published and attributed to you, and that means anything. And the answer to that question is everything said during a press event, whether it's a press conference, briefing, or media roundtable, is going to be on the record. This means that a journalist may quote anything you say for their story. So quick reminder to think before you speak. So for example, if there's an aspect of your current research that you don't want people to write about for whatever reason, we recommend that you make a note of it now, and remember, and whenever, if a reporter were to ask you about that, have some phrases prepared in how you would move the conversation along. So what to say if you don't know the answer. So these are some helpful quotes if you don't know the answer or you don't feel comfortable answering a question. We recommend avoiding phrases like no comment, which can be interpreted as withholding information, or it can be interpreted in a couple of different ways. Instead, we recommend a few handy phrases that are good to keep in your back pocket if a question that you don't want to answer comes up. So a great way to respond is to take a moment, reflect. It's okay to take a second. You don't need to answer right away. And then you might say something like, I don't know the answer to your question, but I can get back to you offline. Or how about we set up a secondary call? Or I don't know, but I can't put you in touch with someone who does, maybe one of your colleagues. Another great one, that's beyond my area of expertise, but what I can tell you is, and then something that you do know to be true. So to reiterate, if you don't know the answer to a question or you don't feel comfortable answering a question, you don't have to. Just find a clever way to move the conversation along. Okay. What comes next? The story continues. So after your press event wraps up, we'll be providing contact information to all of the reporters so they can get in touch with you directly, or with your organizing PIO directly. Maybe they have a follow-up question or want to schedule some sort of interview. We recommend that you are available by phone, Zoom, or email in the weeks following the event. So if they reach out to you, you don't have to be available that day. I know we're all going to be at AGU fall meeting, so it's a pretty busy week, but you might say, I'll be in the office next Tuesday or next Wednesday. Do you have time then? So we also recommend you're ready for TV and radio interviews. So just have an idea of where you would be, when you would be available, and how you would make that work if the question did pop up. And remember that you are on the record throughout these press conferences. Okay, so now questions, a couple questions I saw came up on the chat, but I think we'll open this up to questions for preparing a presentation and questions for the day of the event.
And so from Julie, we have another logistics question. We have panelists who are joining not as speakers, but on deck people in case of questions. Will they also get the panelist Zoom link? Yes, we are just going to add those folks as panelists, and much like Liza and Nancy are sort of on deck for us now, we'll just ask them to keep their videos and mics off throughout the presentation, and the AGU staff who's introducing and moderating your press event will let reporters know that that's what they're there for. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So
I think there's another question also in the chat.
Yes,
which I'm happy to take. So it's about a journalist misquotes you, does AGU follow up? So this is a little, I'll kind of talk talk through this a little bit. So in general, no, AGU is probably not going to follow up if someone, if a journalist misquotes someone. If there is an error, like if they get the name of there's a factual error, we can follow up with them. But what we kind of tell scientists and who are being interviewed by reporters is, you can follow up and ask for a correction, but really think about if it's, perhaps if it's really a factual error, so think about that before you kind of follow up with the reporter. Is it a factual error, or are they kind of just misphrasing it? But we also do tell to and think about if you still want to follow up with them and ask for a correction. But in general, what we tell folks when we do training for scientists with the press is that really the onus is sort of on the scientist to help the reporter get it right. And that's really when we are going back to keeping it simple, keeping it to your main messages and repeating those messages, to keeping it, like we said, simple, and even repeating things that you want people to know. Feel free to repeat multiple times, some of these main points that you really want to get across. Another thing is, you can, if you are doing a one-on-one interview with a reporter, you can ask them, do you understand? Does this make sense? Maybe have them repeat it back to you. It's totally normal too. Like I said, if you're doing kind of a one-on-one interview with a reporter, follow up with them over email and kind of give them, the bullet points that you want them to remember. I mean, I think it's great in our press conferences, if you're doing a press conference, that you're going to have a slide deck, so you can, it'll all be there nicely written out exactly how you want it presented, and the information is there. So those are all ways, and the reporters will have access to these slides after the presentation as well. So and like we said, the recordings will be online so they can go back. But so these are where we really say we want to even avoid it getting to the point where folks are misquoted, or they feel like they're, it's being misconstrued. It's really about preparing those messages, preparing your presentation, and what you want to get out to the press as best as possible before, is really the best way to help ensure that you're going to get, that the reporter is going to get it right. I didn't know if anyone wanted to add anything, but that's generally a good rule.
Yeah, I would just add, oftentimes scientists would like to review their quotes or review an article before it is written. That's fine for press releases, for example, that have been released by your institution that are basically marketing materials. But for science journalism or reported pieces, most outlets have a strict policy against sharing a full draft of an article before it goes out. Some will allow reporters to let you review the quotes that are being used, but you won't basically have the option to change them or to suggest edits or anything. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these interviews and interacting with reporters.
Yeah, that's a great point. Don't assume, because in most cases the outlets do not even allow that to write. But one thing, I mean, I think that we mentioned too, in addition to all this, is be available. So if someone does follow up with an email, or they want to talk on the phone, just to go over information, that, be available so that you can help them. If they do want to say, hey, I just want to run this figure by, this number by you, or whatever it might be. So great point though, Becca.
And emails. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say emails are also on the record. If you were exchanging information with a journalist over email, over text, over Instagram chat, it is on the record.
Very good point.
Yeah.
I think there was another question in the Q&A. Can we turn our cameras off while other panelists are presenting?
I think if everybody's internet quality seems to be working, you could leave your videos on while everybody's presenting. If there do seem to be some technical difficulties, the AGU staff might ask that only the person who's actively presenting or answering a question has their video on. But the default should be have your videos on, muted when you're not speaking. And then from Stephanie, we have a clarification. Slides are optional for roundtables. Yes, if you just want to show up and chat about your science, that's totally fine. And if you choose to use slides, we have a max of 10 minutes to present, and the remaining 50 minutes are for Q&A. That is correct.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're gonna move on to the last. Yeah, Julie, we'll answer your question in a second here once we wrap up. So importantly, now that we've gone through all these logistics and what to expect, we want to end on, sort of your action items. And we'll start with for people who are speaking at these press events. Hope, can you switch? Thanks. So first, you're going to have to make that presentation and prep what you're going to say. We have templates available, AGU themed fall meeting templates in that press materials folder that your PIO should have shared with you. We also have these nice themed backgrounds if you don't want to worry about what objects are on your shelves behind you. But making that presentation is really the next step. We encourage you to work with your PIO and the other panelists I said to make sure that your presentation is sort of up to snuff and sort of where you want it to be. And then once you have those slides and have your messaging nailed down, you do want to do that recording, which as we mentioned, there's that PowerPoint also in that press materials folder that has instructions basically for making those recordings. Once you have your presentation, slides and recording, go ahead and send that to your PIO, and they will be in charge of compiling those materials and uploading them to our Dropbox. So we'll have all of those ready to go. The deadline for that is December 6th, which is, I believe, the Wednesday before fall meeting. Yeah. And we want to help you be as prepared as possible. So we would love to do a run through with everybody who's doing a press event. So work with your PIO basically to find out when folks are available, and your PIO can get in touch with Hope and me about scheduling a run through basically of your press event in the webinar so that on the day of everybody knows what to expect and feels good about using the platform. And we will be sending out all of those links that Hope mentioned this week. So look for that email. And again, we want to stress, please do not share these links. They are panelist links, so anyone you send it to can show up and talk about whatever they want. So keep that close to your chest. Don't share that link. And I think Hope also mentioned a couple of these points, so we'll go through it just quickly. When you're thinking about, what to expect during this press event, think about what questions might naturally bubble up. And especially if you have things that you think might be contentious, as Hope mentioned, it's nice to think about how you want to craft your responses to points of your work that might be contentious. For example, if you're working on climate change or something COVID related, those sorts of things that might be sort of hot button issues or that you really want to have not be misconstrued. You can, again, maybe work with your PIO to think about how you want to phrase those responses. And it's always a good idea to just practice with, colleagues or friends, family. They love it when you talk at them about your science. Just to get comfortable answering questions that you might not be expecting. It's like prelims all over again, but with an audience and recorded. Okay, and then we just have a couple of resources available for you. A lot of these, all of these actually, were linked out in that 4-page PDF that we sent out with a lot of logistics and information. So AGU has some good resources for preparing for a press event in particular, as well as just communicating about your science with the public in general. So for example, on the Share and Advocate page or through the Sharing Science program that we have. And then, just going back through that PDF, I think towards the end, there are a bunch of links for these specific guides and best practices and things. So we just encourage you to take a look through those documents. That might be helpful for you. So that was all for speakers. For PIOs, we just want to sort of reiterate some of those key dates. We would like for you to assemble all of the slides, the presentations in the correct order. And this is so we can, much as Hope is doing now, have a single presentation that we can seamlessly click through with minimal technical, difficulties. We don't want to deal with a missing or corrupted file while we're trying to do the event. So assemble them into their correct order. And if you would like to include any sort of introductory slides in between people's presentations or to ensure that your speakers have included that, that's a good time to just sort of check for those transitions. We would like to have these slides and the recorded presentations by December 6th. So if you would like to request those from your panelists sooner than that, that's up to you. And then again, if you would like to do a dry run or run through, just let Hope and me know, and we can get that scheduled. Yeah, that brings us to the end of our wonderful logistics talk, which everybody loves.
I think we had, oh, go ahead. I was going to read them for you. I'll read them for you. Here we go.
Okay.
I think we may have already answered this, but someone said I might have missed your answer to my question in the Q&A about links for non-speaking panelists. Hope or Becca, I believe can you answer that, please?
Yes, so we're going to be sending a link to the non-speaking panelists, the ones who will be participating just in the Q&A. We'll be sending them a panelist link, so they'll have the same access as everyone else, and they will log right on and be able to present something from their screen, although they won't, as we discussed. We'll be moving along the slides. They'll be able to speak through video, use audio, all that stuff. If for some reason someone does not get the correct link or logs in and turns out to be an attendee, we can also promote them to panelists, so they'll be able to have those access to those tools if they need it. So if you do run into that issue, make sure that you send us a note in the chat, and we'll make sure the right people get panelist status.
Great. Here, I can handle this one. I think it's talking about a public link we can share to promote the press event with our media contacts and possibly get more reporters to register to attend AGU. So how this will work this year is all the virtual events, all the online events are going to be accessed through our mobile app, which also has a desktop version. And we are going to be running them through Zoom. They will be hosted through Zoom, but the way that people will access them if they're attending the meeting is through the mobile app or the desktop version. And the reason is that we want people to be able to log in securely, because these links will not be password protected. So they log in securely with the credentials they use to register for the fall meeting. And then they'll be able to access all these events, including the scientific program events, as well as the press events. So the best thing to do is to tell reporters that you may be reaching out to about your events to register for the fall meeting. That will be the best way for them to be able to get into the events. And then on our media center, which is on the fall meeting website, it will tell them exactly how they can get into the events. But if you have a reporter last minute that didn't register and is like scrambling or whatever, they can always email news@agu.org and we can securely get them the link. We just don't want to be sharing that far and wide because it is a non-protected link. So I hope that answers your question. So we don't want to be posting that on social media or posting that to Eureka Alert, which is the service for press releases, or anywhere like that, because it is just a Zoom link. So the best way for them to do it is to register for the meeting as press, and they'll get all the information about how to get into press events. Or if they, like I said, if it's very last minute, they can definitely email us at news@agu.org. Someone will be monitoring that to make sure that they can get into an event at the last moment. So we answered that one. Here, I'll read out the questions. For the Arctic report card, we show the prepared video as part of the press event. Last year, the audio was a little choppy. Have we figured out a good way to present at this year? Does someone who, I guess, Hope, you're handling the Arctic report card, correct?
I'm not sure that I think maybe Becca is handling this one, but as far as video goes,
Okay.
I'm not sure we've retested videos. If it didn't work last year, we'll have to, that's a good thing for us to do, is retest some videos and maybe get back to you on how that runs. But you're always welcome to try to play a video and then either link to it in a supplementary folder, drop it in the Dropbox, and so we'll make sure it's available to all reporters after the fact.
Yeah, I think good to have do a dry run to practice it, or like you said, to at least make sure it's on hand so that we can drop it right in the chat so reporters can access it right during the press conference. I think sometimes it's people's, it's not necessarily the platform. It could be your internet that you're using. It's just not, it's not great. At the conference center, we will have Wi-Fi, a dedicated Wi-Fi line, but that's why we also ask you to bring a way to plug into an Ethernet cable, because we will have those like hard lines that if we need to, we can plug in there. And if you come a half hour early, we can practice it. But like I said, sometimes it's just the internet and there's no way around it. But if you have that as a link to an outside, so people can access it after the fact, I think is the best way to go.
Great. Is it possible to use extra material to address a question? If by extra material, you mean maybe pointing towards some paper or research, that would be great. We are asking, along with presentation slides, if there is supplemental material, maybe a research paper that you think you might mention, or a graph or any sort of material you think you might mention, that would be great to upload into the same Dropbox as our slides, so that you can point to it and reporters will have access to that after the fact. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I think if you were thinking perhaps of like having extra graphs at the, sort of after your main slides, that might be a little bit tricky, just because then we'd have to be like jumping around and we might not be sure which graph you're referring to. So I think if you do have extra graphs or like technical materials, yeah, I would second putting that into the AGU Connect. Yeah, the press materials. For roundtables, where it is more informal, you can have whatever backup materials you'd like.
Okay, Monica asked, in terms of public affairs officers, PIOs, press officers, whatever you'd like to call it, will we get a link or how will we join? So we'll be sending a link to all of the press officers to join. If you are coordinating a press conference or briefing, we'll send you a link for a panelist spot. So you'll have access to that. And if you're coordinating a roundtable, we'll send you the same Zoom link that we're going to send out to everyone. But you're on our list of people to send that to.
Okay, and then we have a question from Michelle. Should organizations do media advisories of their events, directing them to AGU's media page for registration? Nancy, do you want to answer this one?
Sure. Yes. I mean, that would be great if you do not have to, but if you would like to send out a media advisory, that would be great. And the best way to do it is to, like you said, to excuse me, to refer them to our media center, which is to register. It has all the information about the event. So if you're going to send out ahead of time, that's probably the best place to point them. To our media center, which is on the fall meeting website. And we link to that in all of our media advisories that we send out. But if you are not getting those or you deleted it or whatever it might be, feel free to also reach out to us at news@agu.org and we can point you in the right direction. But sure, if you want to send out a media advisory, that's totally fine with us.
Okay, great. Well, we have 2 minutes left. It doesn't look like there's any questions, but holding a second. Anyone else? Okay, one last question for Liza. Working on press panels on storms and flooding. Can we coordinate since 2 of the panelists are from different organizations?
I assume that's from Monica, and yes, absolutely. Monica, we will work out a practice session together. Does that answer your question?
Okay, we got one more question from Cassandra. In regards to the embargo, am I allowed to tweet my research before the event? I think I think we would prefer if you held back on tweeting your research until the day of your event. And then after that, tweet it as much as you possibly can and talk about our press conference. Anything to add there?
No, and I mean, the reason that we ask that is not to stifle you in any way. It's just that we want you to get the most out of these press events that you all are preparing for. I know you're putting a lot of work into them. So we want reporters to come to the press events and hear about the news and report from there. If it kind of gets out ahead of time and there's already a story written, people might not show up, might not come, or other reporters will consider it old news. So it's really best. That's why we ask you to wait to talk to about it until the event.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email at news@agu.org. And when we get back next week, we'll start holding practice run-throughs for any of you who want to do that. So feel free to also email us about scheduling a walkthrough where we can answer your specific questions more in depth. Okay. Thank you, guys.
And thank you all for participating in these press events. We couldn't do this, obviously without all of you. So, and hopefully see you either in New Orleans or virtually.